Right. So welcome back to the deep dive. This time we are, diving deep into the world of Severance. And, that show that kind of takes that whole work-life balance thing to a whole other, well, kind of unsettling level. Remember season one, where they surgically separate your work memories from your personal life?
Yeah, Severance, it definitely takes those like everyday anxieties about work and just, turns them up to like this crazy dystopian extreme. And it really makes you think like, what if I could just totally clock out and just like completely forget about work? But as the show goes on, it reveals there's definitely a dark side to that separation.
Oh yeah. And what's so fascinating is that this isn't just like, some sci-fi fantasy. We're actually going to be exploring this academic analysis
Yeah.
of Severance. And it connects the show to all these historical ideas about work, things like Taylorism and Fordism. Have you ever heard of those?
Oh, yeah. Well, they might sound like ancient history, but they've really like shaped how we think about productivity even today. Just imagine like breaking down every single task, into these tiny repetitive steps. Like that's Taylorism in a nutshell. It's all about maximizing efficiency, almost like turning humans into, well, machines.
Like those time motion studies where they like analyze every movement to like shave off seconds.
Exactly. And then Fordism comes along and adds the assembly line, taking that efficiency to like an industrial scale.
Oh wow. Okay. So how does this all connect to Severance?
Well, you got to think about Lumen, that kind of creepy corporation in the show. They surgically separate their employees' memories. So you have your work self who has zero idea about your outside life, and then you got your outside self who has like no recollection of their job. And the analysis is basically arguing that Lumen is taking Taylorism and Fordism to their ultimate and kind of disturbing conclusion.
Oh, wow. So it's like they've created like the perfect unquestioning workforce. No distractions, no complaints, just pure productivity.
Exactly. By separating memories, Lumon achieves total control. And employees basically just become these hyper efficient drones who are, totally dedicated to whatever task is right in front of them. But it goes even deeper than that. Remember Michel Foucault, the philosopher? He wrote all about surveillance and discipline.
Yeah, wasn't he the one who said that like prisons and schools are all about like controlling people's behavior?
That's the one. And the analysis argues that that memory separation in Severance is like, like the ultimate form of surveillance
Yeah.
because your work self has no memory of anything else. So you're constantly like policing your own thoughts and actions. You're making sure you stay within all the boundaries that Lumon set.
It's like they've internalized the surveillance.
Right. And this raises a huge ethical question. Like if you can completely control like someone's experience of work to the point where they don't even remember who they are outside of it, aren't you basically robbing them of their humanity?
Wow, that's deep. And this isn't just like abstract philosophical debate. I
Yeah.
think like a lot of people today like worry about, feeling alienated at work like they're just, a cog in a machine.
Yeah, you're right. And the analysis actually brings up Karl Marx here. Remember him? He was the one who talked about how capitalism alienates workers from, their labor, their creativity, and even their own sense of self.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that feeling of being totally disconnected from the work you're doing. Uh like you're just going through the motions.
Exactly. But in Severance, that alienation is like amplified by completely erasing memory. It takes Marx's idea to the extreme. The worker isn't just separated from the product of their labor, but they're separated from their own identity. They just become like a tool for production and nothing more.
It's like the show is saying, what if we push this idea of like maximizing productivity to its absolute limit? And the answer, at least in Severance, is pretty terrifying. Like work just consumes you entirely, leaving no room for anything else.
Yeah, it's a bleak picture for sure. But this idea of alienation, of like losing yourself in work, it goes even deeper. The analysis introduces thinkers like Herbert Marcuse and Eric Fromm, and they explored these concepts in the context of modern work. Have you ever like felt like work just kind of flattens you out, like reduces you to like a function, like a number
Chris.
on a spreadsheet?
Oh, totally. Like you're just expected to be like on all the time, and there's no room for, actual creativity or well, being human.
That's exactly what Marcuse was so critical of in his book One-Dimensional Man. He argues that this type of work, it stifles critical thinking and prevents people from really reaching their full potential. And then there's Fromm, who focused on the loss of authenticity and freedom in modern life.
What do you mean by loss of authenticity.
Well, think about it. If your entire identity is like wrapped up in your job, if you don't even remember who you are outside of work, do you really even have a sense of self? Frommo would say that that kind of alienation just leads to isolation, emptiness, and ultimately dehumanization. And that's literally embodied in the characters in Severance. Like they're split in two, unable to form a cohesive identity.
So it's like the show is saying, hey, what are we willing to sacrifice in, the pursuit of productivity? Our time, our privacy, our very selves. Man, it's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, it is scary, but it's also what makes Severance so thought-provoking. Like it takes these anxieties that we have about work and just dials them up to 11, forcing us to confront, some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society that we live in.
Totally. But there's another layer to this whole analysis that I'm dying to get into. They bring in some really interesting philosophical perspectives on memory, identity, and power. And
Oh yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating. Hold that thought because we're just getting started.
so before we took that break, we were about to go even deeper into Severance with like all this mind-blowing philosophy. Where do we even like start?
Well, the analysis brings up this really fascinating philosopher named Paul Ricoeur, and
Mm.
he was all about the power of stories, like how our memories and personal experiences really shape who we are. He called it our narrative identity.
Like our memories are the building blocks of our sense of self, right?
Exactly. Ricker, he believed that our personal narratives, they give us a sense of continuity, a feeling of belonging in the world. But in Severance, that narrative is literally broken. Your memories are fragmented, so you're loaded with these disjointed pieces of yourself.
Wow, that's got to be like incredibly disorienting. Like how do you even know who you are if you can't remember your own story?
Yeah. And that's precisely how Lumen exerts so much control over its employees. By disrupting their personal narratives, they prevent them from forming a complete sense of self, and it makes them much more vulnerable to manipulation.
It's like they're taking away the foundation of their identity. It makes you
Yeah.
wonder like how much of who we are is tied to our memories.
Right. It's a huge question, and Severance really pushes us to consider that. The show is like a thought experiment playing out, on screen, and the analysis goes even further by bringing in, some other thinkers who've grappled with these ideas of memory and identity.
Hit me with some more philosophical wisdom.
Okay, well, there's this guy named Jean Baudrillard. He's a bit of a mind bender, but he coined this term hyperreality. And basically it's about how the lines between, reality and simulation are getting, more and more blurred, especially in our media saturated world.
Okay, I'm following so far. But how does that connect to Severance?
Well, the analysis suggests that Lumon creates a kind of hyperreality for the severed employees. Their work lives and their personal lives become these two separate, almost artificial realities, and they're so disconnected that neither one feels, completely real.
It's like they're living in two different worlds, but neither one is the full picture.
Exactly. And it makes you question like what it even means to be authentic when our experiences can be, so fragmented and manipulated. And then you have Slavoj Žižek, the Slovenian philosopher. He always has something interesting to say.
Oh, he's the one who's always making like those really intense facial expressions, right? But seriously, what's his take on Severance?
Well, Izek is all about how ideology shapes our reality. He'd probably argue that Lumon's memory separation is more than just about efficiency. It's a form of ideological control.
Yeah.
It's shaping the employees' worldview, their very consciousness.
So Lumon isn't just controlling their bodies; they're controlling their minds too. It's like a subtle brainwashing, making them believe that this fragmented existence is normal.
Hmm. Right. And here's where things get really interesting. The analysis also brings in Michel Desserteau, who studied everyday acts of resistance.
Yeah.
He argued that even within systems of control, people find ways to subvert the rules, to carve out spaces of agency and creativity.
So even in this like tightly controlled world of Lumon, there's hope for the characters to fight back to reclaim
Yeah.
their identities.
That's the implication, and it's something that we see happening throughout the show. The characters start they start questioning the system. They're seeking connections with each other. They're trying to piece together their lost memories. De Certeau called these tactics of resistance. Small acts of defiance that chip away at the dominant power structure.
Oh, I love that. Even in the most dystopian setting, there's that spark of human spirit, that refusal to be completely controlled. But it's not all heady philosophy, is it? The
Yeah.
the show also really captures the emotional weight of what these characters are going through.
Absolutely. The analysis highlights the stark contrast between, the sterile work environment at Lumon and the vibrancy of the characters' personal lives. Think about that scene where Mark is driving home and he passes that bustling carnival.
Oh yeah, it's like this burst of color and life
Yeah.
after being stuck in that sterile office all day.
It's such a powerful visual representation of what they're missing out on. The severed world is all about, control and efficiency, while the outside world is full of, memories, emotions and human connection.
It makes you realize just how much we take for granted in our everyday lives.
Mhm.
Those simple joys and connections that give life, meaning.
And it's that yearning for connection, for a sense of wholeness that really
Mhm.
drives the characters to try and break free from Lumon. It's not just about escaping a bad job. It's about reclaiming their humanity.
It's like they're fighting for their right to be fully human, to experience like the full spectrum of life. But it's not just a sci-fi story, right? It feels like it's tapping into some very real anxieties that people have about work, today.
Absolutely. Severance holds up a mirror to our own lives and asks us to consider what we're willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of productivity and success. Like, are we losing ourselves in our work? Are we becoming disconnected from the things that truly matter?
It's a question worth asking,
Mhm.
especially in a world where the lines between work and life are becoming more and more blurred. But Severance isn't just a cautionary tale. It also offers like a glimmer of hope.
Right.
Right.
It shows us that even in the most oppressive systems, there's always the possibility for resistance, for connection, for reclaiming our humanity. And it reminds us that we have a choice. We
Mhm.
can choose to conform to become cogs in the machine, or we can choose to fight for a more authentic and fulfilling existence.
And that's a powerful message. But we haven't even touched on the symbolism in Severance.
Yeah.
It's like every scene is layered with meaning.
Oh, you're right. The symbolism is one of the most fascinating aspects of the show. It's like a hidden language that adds another level of depth to the story.
Okay, let's dive into that. We've got to unpack the symbolism before we wrap things up. I'm ready for more.
I'm happy to oblige.
Yeah.
Let's start with the most obvious symbol, the Lumon office itself.
Okay, so symbolism. Severance is like packed with it. Where do we even like begin?
Well, the Lumen office itself, it's a giant symbol, right? It's this stark, sterile environment. It's all white walls and minimalist furniture. Everything's perfectly symmetrical. It's like a giant dehumanizing maze.
Yeah, it's so creepy how everything's like so clean and organized.
Yeah.
It's like a hospital or something. Not a place you want to spend 8 hours a day in, that's for sure.
Exactly. It's designed to just like suppress individuality
Yeah.
and just, enforce conformity and don't forget all those weird rituals and codes of conduct that the employees have to follow. Like they're constantly being, watched and judged.
Oh man, the finger traps.
Yeah.
You know that thing where they have to stick their hands in those wooden contraptions and recite that creepy corporate mantra? Ugh, it's got to be one of the most unsettling scenes in the whole show.
It's a perfect example of how Lumon uses these seemingly meaningless rituals to assert their dominance and control. It's like a physical, manifestation of their power over the employees.
It makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. And it plays on those anxieties we all have about the arbitrary rules and expectations we encounter in our own workplaces.
Right. Like, what does this even mean? But you have to do it anyway because, well, that's the rule. And then there's that stark contrast between the sterile work environment and the world outside Le Mans. Remember when Mark is driving home and he passes that uh, vibrant carnival?
Oh yeah, it's like this explosion of color in life, a total sensory overload compared to the dull, monotonous existence inside of Le Mans. It's
Or
like the show is saying, "Hey, look at all the beauty and joy you're missing out on while you're stuck in this corporate prison."
Exactly. It's this powerful visual reminder of the things that truly matter in life.
Hmm.
Human connection, experiences, emotions, things that are totally absent from the severed world.
And that sense of loss, that yearning for something more, it's so palpable throughout the whole show. You really feel for these characters who are basically cut off from their own lives, their own memories.
And it speaks to that fundamental human need for meaning and connection, for something, beyond just work and productivity. And I think that's why the character's quest to break free from Lumon and reclaim their memories is so compelling. It's about more than just, escaping a bad job. It's about reclaiming their humanity.
Yeah, it's like a metaphor for that feeling of being trapped in any kind of system, whether it's work or technology or societal expectations. It's about those parts of ourselves that we might be suppressing or compromising
Yeah.
in order to to fit in, to succeed, to just survive.
And Severance reminds us that it's worth fighting for our wholeness, for our right to be fully human. It's about resisting the forces that try to define us, control us, and limit our potential.
That's a message that really resonates, especially in today's world. So to wrap things up, Severance is more than just a mind-bending thriller. It's a reflection on our modern anxieties about
Mhm.
work, identity, control, and maybe even what it means to be human in an increasingly, dehumanizing world.
It definitely gives us a lot to think about, doesn't it? Like how do we find that balance between, the demands of work and our own well-being? How do we protect our individuality in a world that's constantly trying to fit us into these neat little boxes?
Big questions, for
Right.
sure. But maybe exploring these ideas, through shows like Severance and the thinkers that we talked about today, can help us find some answers, or at least, spark some more deep dives.
Well, I'm always up for a good deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds questioning and those critical thinking skills sharp.
And remember, always be wary of anyone who offers to surgically separate your work memories. It might sound tempting, but trust me, it's not worth it. See you next time for another deep dive.